The police called me at 3 a.m. Your daughter killed herself. We need someone to identify the body. I gripped the phone and shouted, I only have one son. I do not have a daughter. You have the wrong house. They insisted. Please come down to the station, Mr. Ford, or we will be there to pick you up. I slammed the phone down, furious at the incompetence. But when I walked into that cold morgue an hour later, and the coroner pulled back the white sheet, I stumbled backward and nearly hit the wall. Lying there dead was not a stranger. It was the only person who had looked me in the eye with kindness in the last 2 years. And when I saw what was inked on her wrist, a sequence of numbers that should have been a secret, I realized this was not a mistake. This was a message. My name is Harlan Ford. I am 77 years old. I served in the Marine Corps for 20 years and spent another 30 building skyscrapers that define the Seattle skyline. I know concrete. I know steel. I know things that are solid and true. I do not deal in ghosts, and I do not tolerate lies. But on that rainy Tuesday morning, my reality shattered like cheap glass. If you are listening to this, you might think you know your family. You might think the blood in your veins binds you together. But sometimes the people closest to you are the ones holding the knife. Before I tell you how I uncovered the conspiracy that almost put me in the grave, please hit the like button and subscribe. It helps an old man share his truth. And tell me in the comments, has a family member ever kept a secret so big it changed your life? I read every single comment. It started with the ringtone. Not the soft chime of a smartphone, but the jarring mechanical ring of the landline in my kitchen. The red digital clock on my nightstand read 3:12. Outside, the Seattle rain was hammering against the window pane, a sound I usually found comforting. But tonight, it sounded like gravel being thrown at the glass. I picked up the receiver, my voice gravelly from sleep and years of cigar smoke. This is Harlan. Mr. Ford, this is Detective Rourke from the Seattle Police Department. I sat up, the joints in my shoulder clicking. A cop calling at this hour usually meant my son, Preston, had crashed his Porsche or gotten into a brawl at some high-end club. It would not have been the first time. What did Preston do now? I asked, already mentally calculating the bail money. It is not about Preston, sir. It is about your daughter. Maya Ford. I frowned, rubbing my temple. Stop right there. I do not have a daughter. I have one son, Preston. You have the wrong number. There was a silence on the other end. A heavy, uncomfortable silence. Sir, we found a contact card in the victim's jacket pocket. It says Dad, emergency contact with this number. And her ID says Maya Ford. She was found in a motel room on the outskirts of Tacoma. It appears to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound. My heart didn't skip a beat. It just hardened. I was annoyed. Scammers were getting elaborate, or maybe some girl was using my name to get out of trouble. Listen to me, detective. I am a 77-year-old man. I know who my children are. I have one son. He is 45 years old and probably sleeping in his penthouse right now. I do not know Amaya. Mr. Ford, we need you to come down to the King County Medical Examiner's office. Now, or I can send a patrol car to escort you. This is not a request. The line went dead. I sat on the edge of my bed for a moment, listening to the rain. My house, a 4-bedroom Craftsman in West Seattle, felt too big. It had felt too big since my wife Martha passed away 5 years ago. Now it was just me and the silence. I got up and dressed with military efficiency. Flannel shirt, canvas work pants, my old boots. I grabbed my keys and walked out to my truck. It is a 2005 Ford F-150. The last year they made them tough before they started adding all those computers and sensors. I drove through the slick, dark streets of Seattle. The wipers slapped back and forth, counting down the seconds. My mind was racing. Who was Maya Ford? Why did she have my number? Was this some kind of blackmail scheme against Preston? I pulled my cell phone out of the center console and dialed his number. It rang, and rang, and rang. Then his voicemail clicked on. His voice smooth and polished, the voice of a CEO who sells luxury condos to tech millionaires. You have reached Preston Ford, CEO of Ford & Associates. Leave a message. Preston, pick up the phone. The police just called me. Some girl is dead, and they think she is my daughter. Call me back immediately. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. Preston never picked up. He was always in a meeting, or on a flight, or just too busy managing the empire I built to talk to the father who built it. To him, I was just the old man who needed to be managed, the stubborn relic who refused to move into the assisted living facility he kept sending me brochures for. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. My knuckles were white. My mind drifted to the only routine I had left. Every morning at 7 a.m., I went to a small diner on 4th Avenue called the Rusty Spoon. I would order black coffee, 2 eggs over easy, and wheat toast. And every morning for the past 2 years, a waitress named Maya would serve me. Wait. Maya. The name hit me like a physical blow. No, it could not be. Maya, the waitress, was young, maybe 24. She had a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, like she was carrying a heavy load. But she was kind. She knew how I liked my eggs. She knew I hated it when the coffee got cold. She was the only person who asked me how my day was, and actually waited for the answer. Yesterday morning, she hadn't been there. The manager said she called in sick. I had felt a strange pang of worry, a disruption in my universe, but I had brushed it off. People get sick. People have lives. But the police said Maya Ford. My waitress was just Maya. I didn't even know her last name. I pulled into the parking lot of the medical examiner's office. The building was gray, brutalist concrete, looking more like a bunker than a place of rest. The rain was coming down harder now. I walked inside. The air smelled of floor wax and old coffee. Detective Rourke was waiting for me. He looked tired, his tie loosened a stain on his shirt collar. Mr. Ford, thank you for coming. Let's get this over with, I said, my voice sharp. I want to see this girl who thinks she is my daughter. Then I want to go home and have my breakfast. Rourke led me down a long hallway. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. We entered a room that was colder than the outside air. There was a stainless steel table in the center, a body covered by a white sheet. I stood at the foot of the table. My legs felt heavy, like I was walking through wet concrete. Prepare yourself, Rourke said softly. He reached out and pulled back the sheet. I stopped breathing. The face was pale, devoid of the color that used to flush her cheeks when she poured my coffee. Her hair was matted, but there was no mistaking that face. It was Maya. My waitress. I stumbled back, my hand grasping for the doorframe to steady myself. The room spun. You know her, Rourke said. It wasn't a question. I know her, I stammered. She works at the Rusty Spoon. She serves me breakfast. Her name is Maya, but she is not my daughter. Why? Why did you say she is my daughter? Rourke walked over to a metal tray on the counter. He picked up a plastic bag containing a wallet and a piece of paper. Her driver's license says Maya Ford, and this note was in her pocket. He held up the note. It was handwritten, the ink slightly smeared from the rain. I am sorry, Dad. I couldn't do it anymore. Dad. She called me Dad. I shook my head, anger rising up to mask the confusion and the sudden sharp grief I felt for this girl. This is insane. I have never seen this girl outside of the diner. I don't know who put her up to this, but I have one child. Preston. This is some kind of sick joke. Mr. Ford, Rourke said, his voice hardening. We found something else. A tattoo. He walked back to the body and pulled the sheet down further, exposing her right arm. Her arm was slender, fragile-looking. I stepped closer, compelled by a force I couldn't control. On the inside of her wrist, the skin was bruised, but the black ink stood out clearly against the pale flesh. It was a fresh tattoo, maybe a few months old. It was just numbers. 10-24-77. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands started to tremble, a tremor I hadn't felt since I was holding a rifle in the jungle 50 years ago. Those weren't just random numbers. October 24th, 1977. That is my birthday. But it is not just my birthday. It is the combination to the floor safe in my basement. A safe that I haven't opened in 10 years. A safe that contains the deed to my house, my military discharge papers, and the original copy of my will. It is a number I have never told anyone, not even Preston. The only person who knew that combination was my wife, Martha, and she has been dead for 5 years. I looked at the dead girl's face again, really looked at her. Beneath the bruising, beneath the slackness of death, I saw the curve of her nose, the shape of her chin, and suddenly I saw it. I saw Martha. I saw my wife's face in this girl. The room tilted. The hum of the lights turned into a roar. Mr. Ford Rourke's voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. "Are you all right?" I couldn't speak. My mind was racing back 45 years, back to the hospital room where Martha gave birth. The doctor had come out smiling. "It's a boy, Mr. Ford. A healthy baby boy. Just a boy." But lying here on this cold steel table was a girl who looked like my wife, carrying my name with my secret code tattooed on her wrist. I realized then that the gun found in her hand was the least of the mysteries here. Someone had gone to great lengths to hide her, and someone had gone to great lengths to make sure she was found now. I looked up at Detective Rourke. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. "I need to make a phone call," I said. "Not to Preston." Preston wouldn't answer. And for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't want him to answer. Because if this girl was who I started to suspect she was, then my son was not just a busy CEO. He was a liar, and I was going to find out why. I turned my back on the body, but I could still feel the weight of those numbers burning into my mind. 10-24-77. The date my life truly began. And the date that might just end it. I walked out into the hallway, pulling my phone from my pocket. I didn't dial my son. I dialed a number I hadn't called in 20 years. A number for a man who used to be the best forensic pathologist in the state before he got fired for asking too many questions. "Hello," a groggy voice answered. "Doc, it's Harlan. I need a favor, and I need you to bring your kit. I'm at the county morgue." I hung up before he could argue. I wasn't going to let them cremate her. Not yet. Not until I knew why a waitress named Maya had my life etched into her skin. Little did I know, looking at that tattoo was like pulling the pin on a grenade that had been sitting under my house for 4 decades. And the explosion was about to tear everything I knew apart. Part 2 is coming soon. You won't believe what I found when I broke into Maya's apartment. It wasn't a home. It was an observation post. And the target was me. Make sure you are subscribed and have notifications turned on. You do not want to miss what happens next. The heavy metal door swung open and slammed against the wall, echoing through the sterile hallway like a gunshot. It was Preston. My son. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than the truck I drove here, and his hair was perfectly styled despite the hour. He didn't look at me. He threw himself toward the table where the body lay covered, letting out a sound that was somewhere between a sob and a howl. "Oh God, Maya!" he cried out, his voice cracking theatrically. "My sweet girl. I am so sorry." I stood back, leaning against the cold cinder block wall, crossing my arms over my chest. I watched him perform. And that is exactly what it felt like. A performance. I have seen men break down. I have seen fathers hold the bodies of their sons in rice paddies and desserts. Real grief is ugly. It is quiet. It collapses you from the inside out. But Preston was loud. He was throwing his weight around, making sure everyone in the room, especially Detective Rourke, saw his agony. He turned to me, his face contorted. "Dad, I am so sorry you had to find out like this. I wanted to tell you. I swear I did. She was a mistake from my college days. A brief fling. I didn't know about her until a few years ago. I have been supporting her, trying to help her get on her feet, but she was troubled. So troubled." He buried his face in his hands again. I stayed silent, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. My eyes drifted down to his feet. He was wearing handcrafted Italian leather loafers, the kind with the soft soles that soak up water like a sponge. It had been raining in Seattle for 6 straight hours. The parking lot outside was a series of deep puddles. To get from his car to this building, he would have had to walk through at least 2 inches of water. But his shoes were bone dry, not a drop of mud, not a scuff. I looked at the shoulders of his suit jacket. Dry. I looked at the cuffs of his pants. Dry. Suspicion, cold and sharp, pricked at the back of my neck. If he had just driven here in a panic after getting a call from the police, he would be wet. To be this dry, he had to have been inside a building for hours. Or maybe he was waiting nearby, waiting for the call he knew was coming. I decided to test the waters. "You got here fast, Preston," I said, my voice rough. "Traffic is hell on the I-5 in this weather." He froze for a fraction of a second, then wiped his nose with a silk handkerchief. I was at the office late, closer to downtown. I drove like a maniac when I heard." "Liar." I didn't say it. I just nodded slowly. Rourke was watching us, his eyes narrowing slightly as he looked from Preston to me. He sensed the tension, but he bought the story. Why wouldn't he, a wealthy businessman grieving his secret daughter? It was a tragic story that wrapped everything up in a neat little bow. But I knew Preston. I knew he hadn't been to his office past 5 p.m. in 10 years, and I knew he hated surprises. This didn't feel like a surprise to him. It felt like an inconvenience he was trying to manage. "We need to make arrangements," Preston said, standing up straighter, shifting instantly from grieving father to efficiency expert. "We can't leave her here. It is too cold. Dad, I know this is a shock, but I want to handle everything. I will pay for the cremation. We should do it immediately. Tonight, if possible." I stepped forward, pushing off the wall. "Cremation?" I asked. "Since when do Fords cremate their dead? Your mother is buried. My father is buried. We have a family plot. We put them in the ground." "Preston, we give them a stone." Preston waved his hand dismissively, a nervous tic he had when a deal was going south. No. Maya wouldn't want that. She was not traditional. And frankly, Dad, think of the scandal. If this gets out, the press will have a field day. Illegitimate child. Suicide. It will affect the stock price. It will drag our name through the mud. We need to handle this quietly. Ashes are quiet. We can scatter them at sea. It is dignified. It is what she deserves. He wasn't talking about dignity. He was talking about disposal. He wanted to burn the evidence. He wanted to turn this girl, my waitress, my daughter, into dust before anyone could ask why she had my birthday tattooed on her wrist. I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost made me dizzy, but I clamped it down. I needed to be smart. I was in enemy territory. "I am her grandfather," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "Allegedly, if she is your blood, she is my blood, and I say we do not burn her like trash. We wait. We have a service." Preston's jaw tightened. He moved into my personal space, smelling of expensive cologne and stale scotch. "Dad, you are confused. You are upset. You are not thinking clearly. I am her father. I make the decisions. And I say we cremate her. Detective, he turned to Rourke, released the body to the funeral home I called. They are on their way. I want the paperwork started now. He was railroading me. He was pushing for speed because speed hides mistakes. I needed to slow him down. I needed to buy time. I looked at the desk in the corner of the room. There was a stack of papers, the coroner's report, the police preliminary findings, and a styrofoam cup of coffee that Rourke had been nursing. Fine, I said, letting my shoulders slump. I pretended to deflate to be the tired old man he thought I was. You are right, Preston. I am tired. I am confused. Just let me sit down for a minute. My heart is racing. Preston let out a breath, relieved that the obstacle was moving. Good. Good, Dad. Just sit there. I will sign the authorization. Rourke, give me the pen. I shuffled over to the desk, leaning heavily on it. I reached for the chair, but my hand flailed out, clumsy and shaking. I slapped the styrofoam cup. It wasn't an accident, but I made it look like the tremors I sometimes faked to get out of boring board meetings. The cup tipped. Dark, lukewarm coffee flooded across the desk, soaking the stack of papers, dripping onto the floor and splashing onto Preston's pristine Italian shoes. Jesus Christ, Preston yelled, jumping back. Dad, look what you did. My shoes. I am sorry, I mumbled, grabbing a handful of napkins and making a show of dabbing uselessly at the mess. I am so clumsy. My hands, they just don't work like they used to. Damn it, Preston hissed. He looked at the soaked authorization form. The ink was running. It was ruined. I need a towel. Rourke, do you have a towel? I will get some from the dispenser down the hall, Rourke said, looking annoyed as he stepped out of the room. Preston glared at me, then looked down at his ruined shoes. I am going to the restroom to clean this off. Don't touch anything, Dad. Just sit there and try not to destroy anything else. He stormed out, leaving me alone in the room with the dead girl and the wet desk. I stopped shaking immediately. I didn't try to clean the coffee. I grabbed the one file that had stayed mostly dry. It was the crime scene report Rourke had been filling out. I flipped it open. My eyes scanned the typed text, ignoring the coffee stains on the edges. Victim found in motel room 104. Single gunshot wound to the right temple. Weapon found in right hand. Finger on trigger. Residue on right hand. Conclusion. Suicide. I froze. Right hand. The image in my mind was crystal clear. Tuesday morning at the diner. Maya walking over with the pot. More coffee, Mr. Ford, she had asked. She held the pot in her left hand. She poured with her left hand. When she wrote down my order for wheat toast, she held the pen in her left hand. When she wiped the table, she used her left hand. Maya was left-handed. I looked back at the report. Weapon found in right hand. If you are going to shoot yourself, you use your dominant hand. It is instinct. You don't switch hands to end your life. And even if you did, the angle would be awkward. This wasn't a suicide. Someone had put that gun in her hand after she was dead. And that someone didn't know her well enough to know she was a lefty. Preston didn't know. Because Preston didn't know her at all. He wasn't here to mourn a secret daughter. He was here to cover up a murder. I pulled out my phone. I didn't have much time. Preston would be back in seconds. I snapped a picture of the report, focusing on the line about the right hand. Then I snapped a picture of the crime scene photo attached to the back. It showed her body slumped on the motel bed, the gun clearly in her right grip. I shoved the phone back into my pocket, just as I heard Preston's angry footsteps returning down the hall. I sat down in the chair, letting my face go slack, resuming the mask of the senile, clumsy old man. But inside, the Marine was back. The builder was back. I had found the crack in the foundation. Now I was going to bring the whole house down. Preston walked in, scrubbing at his shoe with a wet paper towel. "Okay," he snapped. "Rourke is printing a new form. We sign it and we leave. This nightmare ends tonight." I looked at him, really looked at him. The son I had raised. The boy I had taught to ride a bike. He was gone. In his place was a stranger in a wetsuit, desperate to burn the evidence of his own sins. "Okay, son," I said softly. "Whatever you say." But I knew the nightmare wasn't ending. It was just beginning. And I wasn't going to let him burn her. I had to get into her apartment. I had to find out what she knew. And I had to do it before Preston's cleaners got there. Make sure you are subscribed. In the next part, I break into an apartment that looks like a shrine to my life, and I find a diary that changes everything. You do not want to miss the secret hidden in the toilet tank. I left the medical examiner's office with a fire in my belly that I had not felt since the siege of Quezon. Preston would move fast. He always did. He treated problems like spreadsheets, deleting rows that did not add up until the data looked clean. Maya, or whoever she really was a row he was trying to delete. I knew his cleaners would be on their way to her apartment within the hour. These were not maids. These were men who specialized in making lives disappear, scrubbing fingerprints, shredding documents, and turning a home into a sterile, empty box. I had to beat them to it. I had snapped a photo of the address from the police report when Rourke wasn't looking. It was a crumbling tenement building in the Rainier Valley, a neighborhood that Seattle's tech boom had seemingly forgotten. The rain was coming down in sheets now, turning the streets into rivers of oil and grit. I parked my truck 2 blocks away, tucked behind a dumpster. I didn't want Preston's goons to spot my vehicle if they arrived while I was inside. I pulled my collar up and walked my boots splashing through the puddles, my hand instinctively checking the pocket where I kept my folding knife. I was 77 years old, but tonight, adrenaline was doing the work of a younger man's heart. The building smelled of boiled cabbage and mildew. The hallway was dim, illuminated by a single flickering bulb that buzzed like an angry hornet. Apartment 4B. The door was made of cheap particle board painted a peeling beige. I didn't knock. I knelt down, ignoring the protest of my arthritic knees, and pulled a small leather case from my boot. Lock-picking was a skill I had picked up in the Corps and refined during my years in construction when contractors locked themselves out of job sites. This was a simple tumbler lock, the kind a landlord buys in bulk. I inserted the tension wrench and the rake. Click, click. The cylinder turned with a satisfying snap. I was in. I closed the door behind me and locked it, engaging the deadbolt. The apartment was dark, lit only by the orange glow of a street lamp outside the window. I didn't turn on the lights. I pulled a small flashlight from my pocket and swept the beam across the room. I expected to see the home of a 24-year-old waitress. I expected messy clothes on the floor, maybe a cat posters of bands I had never heard of or cheap furniture from IKEA. What I saw made my blood run cold. The room was sparse. Military sparse. A single mattress on the floor, perfectly made with hospital corners. A small table with 1 chair. No TV, no decorations, no personality, but the walls. My flashlight beam danced across the far wall, and I felt the breath catch in my throat. It was covered in photographs, dozens of them, hundreds of them, and they were all of me. There I was, sitting at the rusty spoon fork halfway to my mouth. There I was, walking out of the pharmacy. There I was, sitting on a park bench feeding pigeons. There I was, arguing with Preston in the driveway of my house. The photos were arranged chronologically, connected by red string like something out of a detective movie. I stepped closer, feeling a violation so deep it made my skin crawl. Was she a stalker? Was she obsessed with me? Was this some kind of sick fixation? I followed the red string to a large map of my property, pinned to the center of the wall. It was detailed, terrifyingly detailed. It marked the blind spots in my security cameras. It marked the times the gardener came. It marked the exact window of my bedroom. My initial thought was that Preston was right. She was crazy. She was dangerous. Maybe she had planned to kidnap me. Maybe the suicide was a botched assassination attempt. But then I looked closer at the notes scribbled on the margins of the map. They weren't threats. They were observations. So 800 hours. Subject looks pale. Shortness of breath after walking 10 yards. 900 hours. Subject took blue pill. Why blue prescription record says white. 1200 hours. Preston visited. Subject agitated. Heart rate likely elevated. I moved the light to the table. There was a stack of notebooks. I opened the top one. It was a log of my medication. She had listed every pill I took, the dosage and the refill dates. But next to the official list, she had written her own notes in red ink. Lisinopril should be round and pink. Dad took an oval white pill today. What is Preston giving him? Atorvastatin dosage increased without doctor visit. Why is he sleeping 14 hours a day? I felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold room. She wasn't stalking me to hurt me. She was monitoring me. She was watching me like a guardian angel in the shadows. She noticed things I was too tired or too trusting to see. I heard the sound of a car engine outside. Tires screeching on wet pavement. Car doors slamming. Heavy footsteps on the concrete stairs. Preston's cleaning crew. They were here. I had minutes, maybe seconds. I needed to find the source. The reason. The proof. I scanned the room desperately. If she was as meticulous as this wall suggested, she wouldn't leave the most important information out in the open. She would hide it. I checked the mattress. Nothing. I checked the freezer. Just ice trays. I ran into the bathroom. It was tiny, smelling of bleach. I checked the medicine cabinet. Empty. Then I looked at the toilet. It was an old model with a heavy ceramic lid on the tank. It is a classic hiding spot, a cliché, but sometimes clichés are true because they work. I lifted the heavy lid, careful not to let it scrape against the porcelain. The water in the tank was still. But there, taped to the underside of the lid in a waterproof freezer bag, was a thick, leather-bound book. I grabbed it, my hands shaking. I shoved the lid back on just as I heard the sound of a key scratching into the lock of the front door. I didn't have time to read it all. I needed to get out. But I had to know. I had to know who she really was. I ripped the bag open and flipped to the first page. The handwriting was neat, precise. It didn't say Diary of Maya. It said The Log of Sarah Ford. Sarah. The name hit me like a physical blow. Sarah. The name Martha and I had picked out 45 years ago. The name of the daughter we were told had died at birth. I read the first entry, my eyes devouring the words, as the front door lock clicked and the handle turned. Day 400, watching Dad. He looks weaker today. I know Preston is switching his heart medication. I tested the trash he threw out. It is not medicine. It is a sedative mixed with a mild toxin. He is slowly poisoning him. I have to tell him. I have to find a way to tell Dad that I am alive and that his son is killing him. But I am scared. If Preston finds out, I know he will kill me first. The door to the apartment crashed open. Clear the room, a deep voice shouted. Bag everything. Burn the rest. I was trapped in the bathroom. The only exit was a small frosted window above the bathtub that led to the fire escape. I shoved the diary into my jacket, zipped it tight against my chest. This book was not just a diary. It was my life. It was the evidence that my son was not just a greedy executive, but a murderer who had been slowly ending my life while smiling in my face. And it was the voice of the daughter I never knew I had. A daughter who had spent her last days trying to save the father who didn't even know she existed. I climbed onto the rim of the bathtub, pushed the window open, and slid out into the rain, just as the bathroom door handle turned. I was out in the cold, wet night sliding down the rusted iron of the fire escape. But I didn't feel the cold. I felt a fire of rage so hot it could burn Seattle to the ground. Preston thought he had cleaned up the mess. He thought he had silenced the girl. But he had made one fatal mistake. He had forgotten about the old man. And now the old man knew the truth. Make sure you are subscribed. In the next part, I invite my daughter-in-law to dinner, but the main course is not food. It is fear. You won't believe how I get her to confess to everything without saying a word. This is where the hunter becomes the hunted. I drove away from Maya's apartment, with the diary burning a hole in my jacket pocket, the rain washing away the mud from my escape, but not the filth of what I had just read. I needed to be smart. I needed to be the soldier, not the father. If I confronted Preston now, he would deny everything. He would call me senile. He would have me committed. I needed proof that would stand up not just in a court of law, but in the court of my own conscience. I needed to look him in the eye and see the killer hiding behind the sun. So I went home, locked the diary in the wall safe behind the furnace that only I knew about, changed into a fresh shirt, and drove to his house for dinner as if nothing had happened. Preston lives in a glass box overlooking Lake Washington. It is the kind of house that wins architectural awards, but feels like a refrigerator. Cold surfaces, sharp angles, nowhere to hide. When I walked in, the air smelled of expensive lilies and impending doom. My daughter-in-law Tara was in the kitchen. She is usually a woman who prides herself on perfection. Her hair always sprayed into submission, her smile practiced. But tonight, she looked like a woman on the edge of a breakdown. Her skin was gray, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. When she saw me, she jumped so hard, she knocked a crystal wine glass off the counter. It shattered on the slate floor, the sound exploding like a gunshot in the quiet house. "I am so sorry," she stammered, dropping to her knees to pick up the shards with bare hands. I am so clumsy tonight." I watched her. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably. A drop of blood welled up on her finger where a piece of glass had nicked her, but she didn't seem to notice. "Leave it, Tara," I said, my voice steady. "You will cut yourself." Preston walked in holding a tumbler of scotch. He looked annoyed, not concerned. "For God's sake, Tara, call the housekeeper to clean that up. Get up. You look pathetic." She flinched at his voice. That flinch told me everything. Tara wasn't just grieving. She was terrified. She knew. Maybe she didn't pull the trigger. Maybe she didn't mix the poison. But she knew. We sat down to dinner. The table was a slab of black marble. The food was some kind of roasted bird that looked too dry to eat. I sat at the head of the table, Preston to my right, Tara to my left. The conversation was a minefield. Preston talked about the cremation arrangements, about scattering the ashes of the mistake at sea tomorrow. I nodded, playing the part of the defeated old man. I chewed slowly, watching them. Then came the moment of truth. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my pill bottle. It was the orange cylinder that contained my heart medication, lisinopril. Or at least, that is what the label said. Sarah's diary said Preston had been swapping the pills for something else, something that weakened the heart muscle over time. I set the bottle on the table with a loud clack. "Time for the ticker meds," I announced, rubbing my chest theatrically. "Doctor says if I miss a dose, I might not wake up." I saw Preston's eyes flick to the bottle. A tiny, almost imperceptible muscle in his jaw jumped. He took a sip of his scotch to hide a smile. "You should take them, Dad," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "We want you around for a long time." I stared at him. The audacity of the lie was breathtaking. "I need some water," I said, "and I need to use the restroom." Excuse me. I left the bottle on the table. This was the bait. I walked to the powder room down the hall, closing the door loudly. Inside, I turned on the faucet to mask any sound. I reached into my other pocket and pulled out an identical orange bottle. This one didn't contain poison. It contained harmless vitamin C tablets that I had shaved down to look exactly like my heart pills. I had spent an hour doing it in my garage before coming here. I waited 2 minutes. Enough time for Preston to relax. Enough time for him to think the old man was just struggling with his bladder. When I walked back into the dining room, the bottle was exactly where I had left it. But the cap was slightly askew, just a fraction of an inch. I had lined up the safety arrow perfectly before I left. Now it was off. He had checked it. He wanted to make sure I was taking the special batch. I sat down. I picked up the bottle. I palmed it, and in one smooth motion that I had practiced 1,000 times with decks of cards in the barracks, I swapped the bottle on the table with the vitamin bottle in my sleeve. It was a move faster than the eye could follow, especially the eye of a man who was already drunk on his own arrogance. I opened the vitamin bottle, shook out 2 white pills, and popped them into my mouth. I swallowed them with a gulp of water, making a show of it. That goes down hard, I said, grimacing. I looked straight at Preston. He was watching me with a look of intense predatory satisfaction. It was the look of a man watching a fly land on the trap. He didn't know he was watching me eat vitamins. He thought he was watching his father commit suicide by prescription. Good, Preston said. It is important to stay on schedule. Tara looked down at her plate, pushing a piece of asparagus around with her fork. She looked like she was going to be sick. We moved to the living room for coffee. The rain was hammering against the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the world outside into a black blur. I checked my watch. 20 minutes since I took the pills. If the diary was right, the poison Preston was using was a fast-acting sedative mixed with a digitalis derivative. It was supposed to mimic a massive coronary event. It was time for the performance of a lifetime. I started to cough. A dry, hacking cough. I dropped my coffee cup. It bounced on the thick Persian rug, spilling brown liquid everywhere. Dad, Tara asked, her voice trembling. I stood up, clutching my chest. My left arm went numb, or at least I acted like it did. I let out a groan, a deep guttural sound of pain. Preston, I gasped. My chest. It feels like an elephant. I staggered forward, knocking over a side table lamp. The room spun, mostly because I was throwing myself off balance intentionally. I saw Preston stand up. He didn't rush to me. He stood there watching, calm as a statue. I collapsed. I hit the floor hard, letting my shoulder take the impact, rolling onto my back. I squeezed my eyes shut, letting out short, ragged breaths. I twitched my legs, mimicking the onset of convulsions. "Oh my God!" Tara screamed. She dropped to her knees beside me. Her hands were fluttering over my face, terrified. "He is having a heart attack. Preston, help him. He is not breathing right." I held my breath, letting my face turn red. "Call 911. Tara shrieked, fumbling for the phone in her pocket. "We have to get an ambulance." I cracked my eyelids open just a sliver, just enough to see. Preston walked over. He moved slowly, deliberately. He reached down and grabbed Tara's wrist. His grip was hard, bruising. "No," he said. His voice was ice cold. What Tara looked at him, eyes wide with horror. "What are you doing? He is dying." "Let me go," I said. "No." Preston hissed. He yanked the phone out of her hand and slid it into his own pocket. "Are you crazy?" Tara was sobbing now, struggling to get up, but he pushed her back down. "Preston, please, he is your father. He is a problem, Tara. And the problem is solving itself." I lay there, my lungs burning from holding my breath, my heart pounding against my ribs, not from poison, but from the sheer terror of the truth. Hearing it, actually hearing it out loud. It is one thing to suspect your child hates you. It is another thing entirely to hear him pronounce your death sentence while standing over your body. "We wait," Preston said, looking at his watch. "We wait 15 minutes. That is all it takes. By the time the paramedics get here, the damage to the heart muscle will be irreversible. It will look like natural causes. He is old. He has a history of heart trouble. No one will question it." "But he is suffering," Tara cried. "Look at him." "Let him suffer," Preston spat. "He made me suffer my whole life, always judging, always controlling, never thinking I was good enough to run the company. Well, look who is in control now, old man." He kicked my leg. Not hard, just a nudge, like you kick a tire to see if it is flat. "He is checking out," Preston said. "Just sit here, Tara. If you make a move, if you scream, if you touch that landline, I swear to God you will be next. Do you want to end up like the girl?" Tara went silent. She slumped on the floor, weeping silently, her hand covering her mouth. I lay there on the cold rug, listening to the rain, listening to the tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hall. Tick-tock. 15 minutes. My son was going to stand there and watch me die for 15 minutes. I had my answer. I had my proof. The diary was right. The girl Sarah was right. I let out one last long, rattling breath, and then I went still. I went completely limp. I stopped acting like a dying man and started acting like a dead one. I needed them to think it was over. I needed them to feel safe. Because when a predator feels safe, that is when they make mistakes. And I wasn't just going to catch them. I was going to destroy them. Preston leaned down. I felt his breath on my face. He put 2 fingers against my neck to check for a pulse. I used an old diver's trick, pressing my arm against my side to suppress the radial pulse, shallowing my breathing to almost nothing. "He is gone," Preston whispered. The relief in his voice was the most painful thing I have ever felt. But the game was far from over. I was about to wake up, and when I did, hell was coming with me. Make sure you are subscribed and hit the notification bell. In the next part, I wake up from the dead, and I uncover a secret about my daughter's birth that has been buried for 45 years. You do not want to miss the results of the secret DNA test. 15 minutes. That is how long a son will watch his father die before he calls for help. I counted every second of it lying on that Persian rug. I listened to the rain hitting the glass and the shallow breathing of my daughter-in-law, who was too terrified to move. And I listened to Preston pacing back and forth, the rhythmic click of his Italian shoes on the hardwood floor, sounding like a clock counting down to my end. When the grandfather clock in the hallway chimed the quarter hour, I knew the test was over. I had seen the bottom of his soul, and there was nothing there but a black hole of greed. I drew in a ragged, shuddering breath, filling my lungs with air, as if I were surfacing from a deep dive. The sound made Preston jump. I heard his footsteps falter. I opened my eyes, and for a brief second I saw it. I saw the look of pure, unadulterated disappointment on his face. It wasn't relief that his father was alive. It was anger that I had dared to survive. He composed himself instantly, the mask of the concerned son sliding back into place, but I had already seen the monster underneath. "Dad," he stammered. You are awake. We were just about to call the ambulance." I sat up, groaning, rubbing my chest with a trembling hand that wasn't acting anymore. "It passed," I rasped. "The pain passed. It must have been indigestion or stress. I need to go home." Preston tried to stop me. He insisted I stay. He probably wanted another chance to finish the job later that night. But I played the stubborn old mule. I told him I wanted my own bed. I told him I would see a doctor in the morning. I stumbled out of that house of glass and lies, leaving him standing there with a bottle of scotch and a failed murder plot. I drove home with my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my study with my service pistol on the desk, watching the door, waiting for him to come and try again. But he didn't come. He was too cowardly to do it with his own hands. He preferred poison and silence. The next morning, the rain had stopped, leaving Seattle covered in a gray, suffocating mist. I didn't go to the hospital. I went to a small, unmarked building in the industrial district near the port. This was the office of Elias Thorne. Elias was the best forensic pathologist the military ever had until he got tired of politics and went private. He was the man I had called from the morgue. He had managed to get samples from Maya's body before Preston had her moved. When I walked in, Elias was sitting under the harsh buzz of a fluorescent light, staring at a computer screen. He didn't say hello. He didn't offer me coffee. He just turned his chair around and looked at me with eyes that had seen too much death to be surprised by anything. But today he looked shaken. "Sit down, Harlan," he said. His voice was gravel. "You are not going to like this." I sat on a metal stool. "Tell me she was murdered, Elias. Tell me the gunshot residue was staged." "It was," he said. "No powder burns on her hand. The angle was impossible. She was strangled first, Harlan. The hyoid bone was fractured. Then she was shot to cover it up." I closed my eyes. I knew it. I felt the validation wash over me, cold and bitter. But then Elias slid a piece of paper across the metal table. "That is not the worst part," he said. "I ran the DNA panel you asked for. I compared her sample to the hair sample you gave me from your hairbrush. You wanted to prove she was Preston's illegitimate daughter, right? You wanted to prove she was your granddaughter." I nodded. That was the story Preston sold me. That was the lie I was ready to expose. Elias leaned forward. "Harlan, look at the markers. Look at the alleles." I looked at the chart. I am an engineer, not a biologist. I see numbers. I see patterns. "She is not your granddaughter," Elias said softly. "She shares 50% of your DNA. A granddaughter would share approximately 25%. This girl, this Sarah, she is not Preston's child." The room went silent. The hum of the refrigerator in the corner seemed to get louder. I didn't understand. My brain refused to process the words. "What are you saying?" I whispered. "I am saying she is your daughter, Harlan. She is Preston's sister." I stood up so fast the stool clattered to the floor. "That is impossible. Martha and I only had one child. One." I was there in the delivery room. I heard the baby cry. I held Preston. There was no other baby. Elias didn't blink. "DNA doesn't lie, Harlan. People lie. Doctors lie. Records lie. But blood tells the truth. She is your daughter." I walked out of his office without another word. I felt like the ground was dissolving under my boots. My daughter. My daughter. The words echoed in my head with the rhythm of my heartbeat. Sarah. The waitress who poured my coffee. The girl with the sad smile. She wasn't my grandchild. She was my child. I drove to my house like a madman. I needed to see the records. I have kept every piece of paper since 1960. Taxes, deeds, medical files. I keep them in the fireproof safe in the basement, hidden behind a false wall in the pantry. I tore through the house, ignoring the housekeeper who asked if I wanted breakfast. I threw open the pantry door and spun the dial on the safe. 10-24-77. The numbers that were tattooed on her wrist. The numbers that were the key to everything. I pulled out the dusty accordion folder labeled 1978. My hands were shaking so badly I almost tore the paper. I found the hospital bill. St. Mary's Hospital. October 24th, 1977. I scanned the itemized list. Delivery room fee. Anesthesia. Incubator. Wait. Incubator fee. 2 days. Preston was a healthy baby, 8 pounds 4 ounces. He didn't need an incubator. He came home with us 3 days later. I dug deeper. I found the discharge summary signed by Dr. Vance, a man who had retired rich a year after my son was born and moved to the Caribbean. I had never questioned it back then. I was a young father, exhausted and overwhelmed. I trusted the man in the white coat. I unfolded the yellowed carbon copy of the birth record. It was faint, the typewritten letters barely legible. Patient Martha Ford. Delivery time 03:14 a.m. Type of birth multiple. Multiple. The world stopped spinning. It just froze. Twin A, male, live birth. Twin B, female, stillborn. Cause of death, respiratory failure. There it was. The lie that had stood for 45 years. They told us she was dead. They told Martha there was complications with the second baby, and she didn't make it. They sedated Martha before she could even see her. They told me it was better not to look better, to let the hospital handle the remains, so we could focus on the healthy boy. I had agreed. God forgive me, I had agreed, because I didn't want Martha to suffer more. But she hadn't died. Dr. Vance had stolen her, or he had sold her, or he had given her away to someone who wanted a baby, and he had pocketed a fee. But Preston knew. I sat on the cold concrete floor of my basement, clutching the piece of paper that proved my entire life was a lie. Preston knew. He must have found this out years ago. Maybe when he took over the company finances. Maybe he hired investigators to dig into family skeletons to protect his inheritance. He found out he had a sister. And he realized that if I found out, if I knew I had a daughter, his share of the empire would be cut in half. Or worse. If he knew I would love her. If he knew I would see Martha in her. He knew I would rewrite my will. He didn't kill her because she was a blackmailer. He didn't kill her because she was a mistake from his college days. He killed her because she was the rightful heir. He killed his own twin sister to keep 100% of a fortune he didn't even earn. And he had let her serve me coffee for 2 years. He had watched her get close to me. He must have been terrified every single day that she would speak up. That is why he swapped my medication. He wanted me dead before she could tell me the truth. He was racing against time. I looked at the date on the paper again. October 24th. They were born together, and he had murdered her alone. I stood up. The grief was gone. The shock was gone. What was left was a cold, hard resolve that felt like steel in my spine. I carefully folded the birth record and put it in my pocket, next to the DNA results. I wasn't a father anymore. I was a judge. And the trial of Preston Ford was about to begin. But I wasn't going to take him to court. That was too easy. A lawyer could get him off on a technicality. No. I was going to destroy his world from the inside out. I was going to make him lose everything he had killed for. I picked up the phone and dialed the number of the private investigator I had hired to bug Preston's office. "Is the wire live?" I asked. "Yes, Mr. Ford," the investigator answered. "We are recording everything." "Good," I said. "Keep recording, because I am about to give him a reason to confess." I hung up. I knew exactly what I had to do next. Preston thought I was weak. He thought I was dying. He thought he had won. He had no idea that the war had just started. Make sure you are subscribed. In the next part, I wiretap my own company and hear a conversation that makes my blood run cold. You won't believe who Preston was working with to fake his sister's suicide. The conspiracy goes deeper than just my family. It goes all the way to the medical board. I sat in the darkness of my basement, the only light coming from the glowing green waveform on the laptop screen in front of me. I am a man who built skyscrapers with slide rules and blueprints, but war teaches you to adapt, and this was war. I had hired Frank, a private investigator, who used to be a sniper in my unit, to break into the Ford and Associates offices downtown. It took him less than 20 minutes to plant a listening device under the mahogany desk I had bought for Preston 10 years ago. Now I was a ghost haunting my own company, listening to the sound of my legacy being dismantled one poor decision at a time. For the first 3 hours, it was boring. Just the sound of Preston yelling at secretaries and shuffling papers. But then the real meeting began. I heard the door lock. I heard the clinking of a bottle against a glass. Preston wasn't drinking alone. He was with his CFO, a man named Miller, who I had never trusted because he had a weak handshake. "How bad is it?" Preston asked. His voice was tight, high-pitched. "It is a bloodbath," Preston Miller replied. "The crypto market crashed again this morning. The leverage positions we took on those offshore exchanges, they are gone. We got liquidated." "How much?" Preston demanded. Miller paused. I watched the green line on my screen go flat for a second. 20 million, Preston. We are down $20 million. The company accounts are empty. The escrow accounts are empty. If the auditors come in next week, we are going to prison. Federal prison. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a cold knot form in my stomach. $20 million. I had spent 40 years building that reserve. I had poured concrete in freezing rain, argued with unions, and saved every penny to ensure the company could weather any storm. And my son had blown it all on magic internet money because he wanted to be a billionaire without doing the work. He wasn't just a murderer. He was a fool. A gambler who had bet the family farm and lost. But the financial ruin was just the appetizer. The main course came 10 minutes later. Miller left and Preston made a phone call. I put on my headphones, pressing them tight against my ears. I needed to hear every breath. The phone rang twice. Then a voice answered. A voice I didn't recognize, but one that sounded greasy, arrogant. "Dr. X here." "It is me," Preston whispered. "You are calling late, Preston. I told you strict communication protocols." "I need more time," Preston said. "The payment. I can't make the full transfer tomorrow. The cash flow is tight." There was a silence on the line that felt heavy enough to crush bone. "That is unfortunate," the doctor said, "because my services are not cheap, and silence is a very expensive commodity. Disposing of a body, forging a death certificate, staging a suicide scene. These things carry risks. If I don't see that $500,000 in my account by noon tomorrow, I might accidentally mail a certain autopsy report to the district attorney. Or maybe to your father." "He is nothing," Preston snapped, though his voice wavered. "He is a senile old man. He suspects nothing." "Don't underestimate him," the doctor warned. "But that is not my problem. My problem is my fee. Get me the money, Preston, or I bring the girl back to life on paper, and we both know what that means for your inheritance." The line went dead. I sat there, my hands trembling with rage. So that was it. He hadn't just killed Sarah. He had hired a professional ghoul to erase her existence, and now he was being bled dry by his own accomplice. He had killed his sister for money, and now the murder was costing him everything he had left. It was a spiral of destruction, and he was circling the drain. But Preston wasn't done. He made one more call. This one was to a number I recognized. It was the family attorney, a man named Sterling, who had been trying to get me to retire for a decade. "Sterling, it is, Preston. We need to move the timeline up." "What do you mean?" Sterling asked. "We haven't filed the paperwork yet." "We do it this week," Preston said. He was pacing now. I could hear his footsteps thumping against the floorboards I had installed. "The old man is losing it. He had an episode at my house last night. He collapsed. He was delusional. He is becoming a danger to himself and others. He is not delusional, Preston Sterling said. He is just old. To declare him incompetent, that is a high bar. I have the doctor on board, Preston lied. I have a psychiatrist who is willing to sign the affidavit based on my testimony. We cite dementia, paranoia. We say he is seeing people who aren't there. He is talking about a daughter who doesn't exist. I froze. He was going to use Sarah against me. He was going to use the truth to paint me as crazy. If we get the emergency guardianship order, Preston continued, his voice gaining confidence, I can take control of his personal assets immediately. The bank accounts, the properties, the trust fund. I can liquidate what I need to cover the company expansion. And Harlan Sterling asked, what happens to him? There is a facility in Oregon, Preston said. A secure memory care unit. Very private. No phones. No visitors without guardian approval. I have a van ready to pick him up on Friday morning. We sedate him, we transport him, and by the time he wakes up, he is a resident. He will never leave. Friday. Today was Wednesday. He wasn't just planning to steal my money. He was planning to bury me alive. He was going to lock me away in some white-walled prison where no one would listen to the ramblings of a crazy old man about a murdered daughter and a stolen fortune. He was going to erase me just like he erased Sarah. I took off the headphones and looked at the calendar on the wall. Friday morning. That gave me less than 36 hours. I felt a strange calm settle over me. It was the calm of the battlefield right before the first shot is fired. Preston thought I was a helpless victim. He thought he was the predator. He had no idea that he had just given me the weapon I needed to destroy him. He wanted to prove I was crazy. He wanted to prove I was seeing things fine. I would give him exactly what he wanted. I would give him a show that would make him question his own sanity. I picked up the phone and dialed Tara, my daughter-in-law. She was the weak link. She was the crack in his armor. And after the dinner party from hell, I knew she was ready to break. Tara, I said, when she answered, her voice sounding small and terrified. Dad. Is that you? Are you okay? I am fine, Tara, but you are not. I know what he is planning. I know about the money. I know about the girl. And I know you don't want to go to prison for being an accomplice to murder. There was a sob on the other end. I didn't do anything. I swear. I know, I said, my voice softening. But the police won't believe that. Unless you help me. Help you do what she asked. I need you to get me into his office tonight, I said. I need the key to his private safe. And then I need you to invite him to lunch tomorrow. Just the two of you. Was it 'cause? I said, staring at the green waveform on the screen that represented my son's betrayal. I am going to prepare a little surprise for him. He wants to send me away on Friday. Well, I think it is time for him to meet the ghosts he created. I hung up. Preston Ford was planning to play the dementia card. He was about to find out that the only thing scary about a crazy old man is when the old man stops acting crazy and starts getting even. Make sure you are subscribed. In the next part, I use the one person Preston trusts to lure him into a trap. But this isn't just a trap. It is a psychological nightmare. You won't believe what I put in his car trunk. I called Tara and told her to meet me at a coffee shop on Pike Street, a place far enough from the company headquarters that Preston would not have spies and crowded enough that she would feel safe. I arrived 20 minutes early. I sat in the corner booth with my back to the wall watching the door. Old habits die hard. When you are about to interrogate a hostile witness, you control the environment. But Tara was not hostile. She was broken. When she walked in, she looked 10 years older than she had at dinner the night before. Her eyes were swollen, hidden behind large sunglasses, and she wore a trench coat belted tightly around her waist, as if she were trying to hold herself together physically. I didn't stand up. I didn't hug her. I waited until she sat down and nervously ordered a green tea. She refused to look at me, her gaze darting around the room, checking every face. She was terrified of him. Preston had done a thorough job of instilling fear in the people who were supposed to love him. "Thank you for coming," I said, keeping my voice low and even. "I know you are scared, Tara. I know what he told you. He told you that if you talk to me, you will lose everything. The house, the status, the money." She nodded, a jerky mechanical motion. "He said you are sick, Dad. He said you are making things up. He said if I indulge your delusions, I am hurting you." I reached into my leather jacket pocket. I didn't pull out a weapon. I pulled out a thick brown envelope. It contained the report from Frank, my private investigator. While Frank was bugging the office to catch a thief, he had inadvertently caught a cheater. The photos inside were high resolution. They showed Preston entering a boutique hotel in Bellevue. They showed him at a candlelit dinner. And they showed him kissing a woman who was definitely not Tara. She was young blonde and looked expensive. I slid the envelope across the scratched wooden table. "He is lying to everyone, Tara," I said. "He is lying to me about the company money. He is lying to the police about his sister. And he is lying to you about who he is when he leaves the house at night." She stared at the envelope. She didn't want to open it. She knew what was inside. Wives always know. They just choose not to see until you force their eyes open. "Open it," I commanded softly. She opened the flap with trembling fingers. She pulled out the first photo, then the second. She didn't scream, she didn't make a scene. She just let out a small whimpering sound, like a dog that has been kicked by its master. She dropped the photos onto the table and covered her mouth with her hand. "He told me he was working late," she whispered. "He said he was trying to save the company from your mistakes. He is spending the company money on her, Tara," I said, twisting the knife because I had to. "That is where the missing millions are going. Not to bad investments. To a lifestyle he feels he deserves. He is planning to put me in a home on Friday, take control of the trust, and then what do you think happens to you? Do you think he keeps the wife who knows his secrets? Or do you think he trades you in for the model in the picture?" Tara looked up at me. The sunglasses came off. Her eyes were red raw with pain, but the fear was replaced by something else. Humiliation. And humiliation is a powerful fuel. "He is a monster," she said, her voice shaking with rage. I leaned forward. "I know he is. But I need you to tell me about Sarah. I need you to tell me exactly what happened. Not the story he told the police. The truth." Tara took a deep breath, clutching her tea mug with both hands to stop them from shaking. "She came to the office 6 months ago," Tara began. "She didn't storm in. She made an appointment. She used her real name, Sarah Ford. Preston thought it was a joke at first. But when she walked in, Dad, she looked just like you. She had your chin, she had your eyes." I felt a lump form in my throat, but I swallowed it down. "Go on." "She didn't ask for money," Tara continued. That is what made Preston so angry. If she had asked for $1 million, he would have understood. He understands greed. But she brought a photo album. She had pictures of her childhood. Her adoptive parents had died last year. She found her birth certificate in their papers. She just wanted to know us. She wanted to meet you. She said she used to serve you coffee every morning, and she wanted to tell you who she was, but she was scared you would reject her. I closed my eyes. The image of Maya Sarah pouring my coffee, waiting for a sign, waiting for permission to be my daughter, tore at my heart. "Preston told her to leave," Tara said. "He told her she was a scam artist. He threatened to call security. But she kept coming back. She sent emails. She said she didn't want a share of the company. She would sign a waiver. She just wanted a family. And that is why he killed her," I said. "Because he didn't believe her." Tara nodded. He said she was playing the long game. He said once she got in, she would sell half of everything. He started gaslighting her dad. He hired people to break into her apartment and move things around. He hired people to call her at night and hang up. He wanted to make her paranoid. He wanted to build a record of mental instability so that if she ever went public, no one would believe her. He created the depression narrative. He told me he was handling a nuisance. I didn't know he was planning to kill her. I swear to God, Harlan, I didn't know until the police called. I believed her. Tara was weak, but she wasn't a killer. She was just a woman who had married a man she didn't know. But you know now, I said. You know he did it. She looked down at the table at the face of the woman Preston was sleeping with. I know, because he wasn't home, she whispered. The air in the coffee shop seemed to freeze. This was it. This was the nail in the coffin. Tell me, I said. The night Sarah died, Tara said, her voice barely audible over the hiss of the espresso machine. It was Tuesday. Preston said he had a board meeting. He said it would go late. He left the house at 6, but I went into his study around 9. I was looking for a stamp. The wall safe was open. Just a crack. Preston never leaves the safe open. I leaned in closer. And his gun was gone, she said. The Ruger LCP. The one he keeps for home defense. He usually keeps it loaded in the safe. It wasn't there. Did he bring it back? I asked. She nodded. I heard him come in around 2 in the morning. He went straight to the study. I heard the safe beep. The next morning when he was in the shower, I checked. The gun was back. But it smelled different. It smelled like cleaner. Like oil. And there was a scratch on the barrel that wasn't there before. I sat back in the booth. I had him. I had the motive. I had the means. And now I had the opportunity confirmed by a witness who could destroy his alibi. Preston had taken his own gun, driven to that motel, strangled his sister, and then shot her to make it look like suicide. He had cleaned the gun, put it back, and then put on his suit to come to the morgue and cry. You have to tell the police, Tara, I said. I can't, she cried, tears spilling over again. He will kill me, Harlan. You don't know what he is like when he is cornered. He told me that if I ever betrayed him, he would make it look like an accident. He said he would break the lines on my car. He said he has people. He has nobody, I said firmly. He has a doctor who is blackmailing him and a father who is about to take him down. You are safer with me than you are in that house. But I need you to do one thing. I need you to help me catch him in the act. What do you mean? She wiped her eyes. He thinks I am going into a home on Friday, I said. He thinks he has won. We are going to let him think that. But tomorrow I need you to add him to the hospital. I am going to check myself in. I am going to tell the doctors I am feeling confused, that I want to update my will before I lose my mind. Update your will. Tara looked confused. I am going to leave everything to the Sarah Ford Foundation, I said. And I am going to make sure Preston knows about it. He will go crazy, Tara whispered. He will try to stop you. Exactly, I said. He will try to stop me. And he will try to do it before the lawyers get there. He will come to the hospital. And when he does, he won't bring a lawyer. He will bring a needle. And when he tries to use it, I want you to be the one who let him into the room. Tara looked horrified. You want me to help him kill you? No, I said, reaching across the table and taking her hand. Her skin was cold. I want you to help him try. Because the police will be listening. And when they put the cuffs on him, Joe, you will be the grieving wife who helped catch a monster. You will be a hero, Tara. And you will be free. And more importantly, you will be rich. Because I will make sure the woman who helped me get justice for my daughter is taken care of for the rest of her life. She looked at me. She looked at the photos of the cheating husband. She looked at the years of abuse etched into her own face in the reflection of the window. "Okay," she said. Her voice was steady for the first time. "Okay, Dad. Tell me what to do." I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a commander who just secured the final flank before an ambush. "Get in your car," I said. "Go home. Act normal. Burn these photos. And wait for my call. When the phone rings tomorrow, the performance of your life begins." I watched her leave the coffee shop. She walked differently now. She wasn't hunching. She had a mission. Preston Ford had made a lot of mistakes, but his biggest one was underestimating the women in his life. He thought he could discard his sister. He thought he could cheat on his wife. He was about to find out that hell hath no fury like a family scorned. Make sure you are subscribed. In the next part, the trap is set. I check into the hospital to wait for my assassin. But Preston has one last trick up his sleeve, and for a moment, I think I might actually die in that hospital bed. You do not want to miss the climax. I sat in Detective Rourke's office, the air stale with cheap coffee and old crimes, and I placed the digital recorder on his desk. The little black box held the voice of my son, conspiring to lock me away, and the confession of my daughter-in-law implicating him in murder. But it wasn't enough. Not for me. Rourke looked at me with tired eyes, his fingers drumming on a stack of files. He told me we had enough for an arrest warrant based on the wiretap fraud and the illegal disposal of a body. But a murder charge for Sarah was tricky without a confession or a murder weapon. I told him I didn't want an arrest. I wanted a total defeat. I wanted Preston to walk into a cell he locked himself. I explained my plan. It was dangerous and it violated about a dozen police protocols, but Rourke was a father too. I saw the look in his eyes when I played the part of the tape where Preston laughed about erasing his sister. Rourke agreed to give me 24 hours. He would set up the surveillance in a private room at St. Jude's Hospital. He would have officers in the hallway, disguised as orderlies. But inside the room it would be just me and the monster I raised. This was the only way to get the truth recorded in a way a jury could never ignore. The next phase was the performance. I needed to be dying. Not just sick, but at death's door. I called my personal physician, Dr. Evans, who had been treating my hypertension for 20 years, and told him the truth. Evans was a good man, a man of science who believed in justice. He agreed to admit me under the guise of a massive stroke complicated by heart failure. We made it look real. The ambulance ride was theater with sirens blaring through the rainy Seattle streets. I wanted the neighbors to see. I wanted the whispers to start. By the time I was wheeled into the emergency room with an oxygen mask over my face, the rumor was already spreading through the grapevine that Harlan Ford was checking out. But a dying man is not a threat to a predator like Preston. A dying man is a gift. To make him panic, I needed to be a dying man who was about to burn his inheritance. I had Tara make the call. She played her part perfectly, her voice trembling with what sounded like grief, but was actually the adrenaline of finally fighting back. She called Preston and told him that I was lucid during the moments I woke up. She told him that I was furious and rambling about betrayal, and that I had summoned my estate attorney to the hospital immediately. Then came the kicker. The lie that would drive him insane. Tara told him that I was rewriting the will to leave the entire $50 million estate, including the company and the house, to the Seattle Stray Dog Rescue Foundation. I knew Preston hated dogs. He thought they were dirty and useless. The idea of his fortune, the money he had killed his sister for going to feed stray mutts, would be an insult so profound it would snap whatever rational thread he had left. I lay in the hospital bed, hooked up to monitors that beeped in a steady rhythm. The room was dim, lit only by the streetlights outside and the glow of the medical equipment. I checked the hidden camera in the smoke detector. It was blinking a tiny red light that only I could see. I checked the pistol taped under the serving tray next to the bed. It was loaded. I was ready. Preston received the news at his office. Through the bug I still had active, I heard the moment his world fractured. He didn't scream. He went eerily silent. Then I heard the sound of glass shattering against a wall. He was cornered. The auditors were coming for the company next week. The loan sharks were coming for the blackmail money tomorrow. And now the inheritance, which was his only parachute, was about to be signed away to a charity. He had no time to stage an accident. He had no time to wait for nature to take its course. He had to act tonight. I heard him rummaging through his desk. Then I heard him make a call to a contact I didn't recognize, asking about rapid-acting insulin. It was a smart choice for a coward. Insulin is a hormone naturally present in the body. A massive overdose causes hypoglycemia, sending the victim into a coma and then death. In an elderly man with heart history, it would look like a metabolic crash, hard to detect unless you are looking for it. And Preston was betting that no one would be looking. He left his office at midnight. The rain was back pounding against the city like a drum roll for an execution. I visualized his drive. He would take the back roads to avoid traffic cameras. He would park far away from the hospital entrance. He would use the service elevator. He knew the layout of St. Jude's because his company had built the new wing 5 years ago. He knew where the cameras had blind spots. He thought his knowledge gave him power, but he forgot that I was the one who taught him to read blueprints. I knew exactly where he would enter. Lying there in the dark, waiting for my own son to come and kill me, was a torture I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Every squeak of a cart in the hallway made my muscles tense. Every shadow that passed the door looked like him. I thought about Sarah. I thought about the daughter I never got to hold. I wondered if she felt this fear when she realized her brother wasn't going to help her, but hurt her. I gripped the sheets, my knuckles white. I was doing this for her. I was doing this to make sure that when he went down, he stayed down forever. Around 2 a.m., the hallway quieted down. The nurses were at their station changing shifts. This was the window. The vulnerability. I heard the soft squeak of rubber soles on linoleum. Not the heavy boots of a doctor, but the expensive loafers of a man who thought he owned the world. The door handle turned slowly. It was agonizingly slow. He was testing it, checking if it was locked. It wasn't. I had made sure of that. The door pushed open a crack. A sliver of light from the hallway cut across the floor. I closed my eyes, regulating my breathing to a shallow rasp. I needed him to think I was unconscious. I needed him to feel safe enough to boast, safe enough to say the words that would seal his fate. He slipped inside and clicked the door shut behind him. The room plunged back into semi-darkness. I could smell him before I heard him. He smelled of rain and nervous sweat, and that cloying, expensive cologne he wore like armor. He stood at the foot of the bed for a long time, just watching. I could feel his gaze crawling over me. He was assessing the threat. He was checking the monitors. Heart rate 65. Oxygen saturation 92. Stable. Too stable for his liking. He moved to the side of the bed. I heard the rustle of his jacket. He was reaching into his pocket. The sound of a plastic cap being removed was tiny, but in the silence of the room it sounded like a gunshot. He was uncapping the syringe. I didn't move. I kept my eyes shut, but my right hand drifted imperceptibly under the blanket, inching toward the tray table where the gun was taped. "Hey, Dad." He whispered it. It wasn't a greeting. It was a taunt. "I heard you are giving my money to the dogs. That is just like you, always trying to be the saint, always trying to teach me a lesson." I felt the mattress dip as he leaned over me. His voice was right by my ear now, close and venomous. "You should have just died at the house. It would have been peaceful. Now I have to do this the hard way." I felt the cold touch of an alcohol wipe on my arm. He was cleaning the injection site. He was thorough. Even in murder, he was a perfectionist. "Do you know what this is?" he whispered. "It is just a little sugar crash. You will go to sleep and you won't wake up. And tomorrow I will cry at your funeral, and then I will bulldoze this hospital and build a casino. And no one will ever know about Sarah. She is dust, Dad. And in 5 minutes you will be too." The needle touched my skin. This was it. The confession. The intent. The weapon. I waited for the prick. I waited for him to commit the act that would damn him forever. But just as the needle broke the skin, I snapped my eyes open. I grabbed his wrist with a grip that hadn't weakened in 77 years. His eyes went wide. The shock on his face was total. He tried to pull back, but I held on. I held on with the strength of a father who had lost one child and was about to destroy the other. "No, Preston," I said, my voice clear and cold as ice. "The dogs can wait. But the devil is ready for you right now. Make sure you are subscribed and turn on notifications, because what happens in the next 10 seconds changes everything." The police are outside, but Preston is desperate, and he is holding a needle full of death. You do not want to miss the final showdown. The hospital wing plunged into darkness exactly at 2:14 in the morning. It was not a power failure. It was a tactical blackout orchestrated by Detective Rourke to clear the hallway of any innocent witnesses and to give my son the cover he thought he needed. I lay still in the bed, listening to the backup generators humming deep in the bowels of the building. The only light in the private room came from the rhythmic green pulse of the cardiac monitor. Beep. 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 It was the soundtrack of my life fading away, or at least that is what Preston believed. To me, it sounded like a countdown. I regulated my breathing, keeping it shallow and ragged. My eyes were closed, but my other senses were dialed up to maximum intensity. I could smell the antiseptic cleaner on the floor tiles. I could hear the rain lashing against the window pane on the 4th floor. And then I heard him. The door handle turned with a soft, metallic click. It was slow and deliberate. He was testing the waters. A nurse would have knocked. A doctor would have breezed in with a chart. But a killer enters like a draft of cold air. The door opened and closed, and the air pressure in the room shifted. I sensed his presence before I heard his footsteps. He moved toward the bed, and his breathing was fast, a little too loud. He was nervous. Good. Nervous men make mistakes. Nervous men talk to fill the silence. I kept my hand under the heavy thermal blanket, my fingers wrapped around the textured grip of the pistol I had taped to the mattress frame hours ago. It was cold against my skin, but it was the only comfort I had left. Preston stopped at the foot of the bed. I could feel his eyes scanning the equipment. He was checking the monitors, ensuring that the blackout hadn't triggered an alarm at the nurse's station. He didn't know that the nurse's station was currently occupied by 4 armed officers watching this entire scene on a monitor. He took a step closer, and the smell of rain and expensive scotch hit me. He had needed a drink to build up the courage to kill his own father. That was pathetic. I wanted to sit up and strike him right then, but I needed the act to be complete. I needed the needle in his hand. He moved to the left side of the bed where the IV stand was positioned. I heard the rustle of his jacket as he reached into his inner pocket. The sound of the syringe cap popping off was sharp and final. He didn't hesitate this time. There was no shaking in his hands now. He was committed. He was looking at the saline bag, looking at the injection port on the clear plastic tubing that ran down toward my arm. He thought the tube was connected to the cannula in my vein. He didn't notice that under the thick layers of gauze and tape on my forearm, the needle had been removed, and the tube was feeding harmlessly into the dense foam of the hospital pillow. He leaned over me. His shadow blocked out the green light of the monitor. I felt his warm breath on my ear, and it made my skin crawl with a revulsion so deep it felt like physical pain. He was close enough to kiss me or kill me. He chose to gloat. It is the fatal flaw of every narcissist. They need their victims to know they won. They need to rewrite history one last time before the book closes. You know, Dad, he whispered, and his voice was a snake sliding through dry grass. You really shouldn't have threatened the money. The money was the only reason I let you live this long. I tolerated your stories. I tolerated your judgment. But giving my inheritance to a bunch of stray dogs, that was an insult I couldn't swallow. He paused, and I felt the vibration of his hand as he grabbed the IV line. He was stabilizing it. And about Sarah. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced my body to remain limp. He was going to say it. He was going to give me the truth. She was so much like you, he hissed. Stubborn, arrogant. She wouldn't take the money I offered her to leave town. She wanted a family. She wanted you. When I met her at that motel, she looked me in the eye and told me she was going to tell you everything. She wasn't afraid of me. She fought back, Dad. She fought hard. I listened to the confession of my daughter's murder spoken by her own brother. I had to squeeze her throat for 3 minutes before she stopped kicking, he whispered. I had to watch the light go out in her eyes. It was messy. I didn't want to do it. But she gave me no choice. Just like you are giving me no choice right now. I have to squeeze the life out of this family to save it. He positioned the needle against the rubber port. You should be proud, he said softly. I am doing exactly what you taught me. I am doing whatever it takes to get the job done. Goodbye, old man. Say hello to Sarah for me. I felt the pressure on the line as he pushed the needle in. I heard the plunger depress. The lethal dose of insulin flooded into the tube, racing down toward the pillow that Preston thought was my bloodstream. He held the plunger down for a second, making sure every drop was gone. Then he pulled the needle out and took a step back, letting out a long, exhaling breath of relief. He thought it was over. He thought the clock had stopped. He was wrong. The clock had just started. I waited exactly 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. I opened my eyes. In the dim green light of the heart monitor, I saw his face. He was smiling a small, twisted smile of victory. When he saw my eyes snap open, that smile didn't just fade, it shattered. He looked like he had seen a ghost. He stumbled back, his hip hitting the metal tray table. Dad. He gasped. I didn't say a word. I ripped the tape from the mattress and brought the pistol up in a smooth, practiced arc. The barrel caught the green light as I leveled it directly at the center of his forehead. The distance between us was less than 4 feet. I could see the sweat beading on his upper lip. I could see the pupils of his eyes dilating in sheer primal terror. He froze. The empty syringe slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the linoleum floor. I sat up slowly, letting the fake IV tube fall away from my arm. I didn't look like a dying man anymore. I looked like the Marine who had survived jungles and wars and betrayals that would break a lesser man. I held the gun steady, my hand as rock solid as the foundation of the buildings I built. You said she fought like me, Preston, I said. And my voice was not a whisper. It was a growl from the deepest part of my chest. You were right. She had my blood. She had my strength. But you made a mistake, son. You didn't finish the job with her, and you certainly didn't finish the job with me. He raised his hands, trembling violently. Dad, wait. It is not what you think. It is just medicine. I was trying to help you. Stop, I barked. Don't you dare lie to me one last time. I heard you. The police heard you. The whole world just heard you admit that you strangled your sister because she wanted to be loved more than she wanted to be paid. Preston looked at the door, then back at the gun. He was calculating. He was wondering if he could rush me. He was wondering if the old man had the guts to pull the trigger. I cocked the hammer. The click was loud in the small room. I see the resemblance too, Preston, I said, leaning forward so he could see the fire in my eyes. You look just like me. You walk like me. But that is where it ends. Because I build things, you destroy them. And tonight, you just destroyed yourself. Now get on your knees. Preston hesitated, his arrogance warring with his survival instinct. I said, "Get on your knees," I roared, swinging the gun slightly. "Or I will show you exactly what kind of choice Sarah didn't have." He crumpled. He dropped to his knees on the cold hospital floor, sobbing into his hands, the expensive suit bunching up around him. The monster was gone. All that was left was a pathetic, greedy child who had lost the game he rigged. But the game wasn't over until the final piece was played. I kept the gun trained on him, but I wasn't going to shoot. Death was too easy for him. He deserved a long life. A long life in a small cage thinking about the sister he murdered and the father he underestimated. I reached over with my free hand and pressed the call button on the bed rail. "It is time," I said. "Make sure you are subscribed and hit that notification bell." In the next part, the lights come on and the police swarm the room. But Preston has one final desperate card to play in the courtroom, and it involves a secret that not even I knew. You do not want to miss the shocking conclusion of the trial. The overhead fluorescent lights flickered once and then flooded the room with a blinding, sterile white brightness that felt like an interrogation lamp being turned on in a dark cell. Preston threw his hands up to shield his eyes, letting out a sharp cry of surprise that was cut short by the sound of the bathroom door crashing open against the wall. It wasn't just Detective Rourke who stepped out. It was a tactical team of 4 officers, their vests heavy with gear, their weapons drawn and leveled with professional precision. The small hospital room, which seconds ago had been a quiet tomb for a dying father and a murderous son, was instantly transformed into a command center of justice. I lowered my pistol slowly, my hand still steady, but my heart pounding a rhythm of sorrow against my ribs. I watched Preston blink rapidly, trying to process the sudden shift in his reality. He looked from me to Rourke, then to the officers, and finally to the digital recorder that Rourke held up in his hand. The tiny red light on the device was steady, a crimson eye that had witnessed everything. Preston Ford Rourke announced, his voice filling the room with the weight of the law. "You are under arrest for the murder of Sarah Ford, formerly known as Maya. You are also under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Preston didn't remain silent. He didn't crumble immediately. Denial is a powerful drug, and my son had been high on it for years. He looked at me, his face twisting from fear into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. He lunged. It wasn't a calculated move. It was the desperate flailing of an animal caught in a trap. He threw himself toward the bed, reaching for the gun I still held in my lap. He screamed a sound that had no words, just raw fury. He didn't make it 2 steps. 2 officers were on him before he could even touch the bed rail. They hit him with the force of a freight train, tackling him to the linoleum floor. The sound of his expensive suit tearing and his body hitting the hard ground was sickening but necessary. They wrenched his arms behind his back. I heard the distinct metallic ratcheting sound of handcuffs tightening. Click. 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 It was the sound of his future closing in on him. "Get off me!" Preston roared, thrashing against the weight of the officers. "Do you know who I am? I am Preston Ford. I own this hospital. I own this city. This is a mistake. My father is senile. He is hallucinating. Look at him. He has a gun. Arrest him." Rourke walked over and stood over my son, looking down with an expression of absolute disgust. "We heard the tape, Preston. We heard you talk about strangling your sister. We heard you talk about the insulin. We have the syringe. We have the motive. And thanks to your father, we have the confession. It is over." They hauled him to his feet. His hair was messed up, his tie was askew, and his face was pressed against the floor moments ago, leaving a red mark on his cheek. He looked wild. He looked nothing like the composed CEO who had walked in here to kill me. He looked at me, his eyes pleading now, shifting tactics in a split second. "Dad." He choked out, struggling against the grip of the officers. "Dad, tell them. Tell them this was a test. Tell them I was testing your alertness. I wouldn't have done it. I am your son. I am the only one left. You can't let them take me, the company, Dad, the legacy. It will all burn without me. I am your only child." I sat on the edge of the bed and swung my legs over the side. I placed the gun on the tray table and stood up. My knees were shaky, not from age, but from the sheer emotional toll of the night. I walked over to where he stood, held fast by the men in blue. I looked him in the eye. I looked for the little boy I used to take fishing. I looked for the young man I sent to college. But they were gone. All that was left was the stranger who had killed his own twin. I leaned in close so he wouldn't miss a single syllable. "No, Preston." I said, my voice low and rough like gravel grinding together. "You are wrong. I don't have one child. I have two." He stared at me, confusion clouding his panic. Her name was Sarah. I continued, letting the name fill the space between us. And I never got to hold her. I never got to teach her to ride a bike. I never got to see her graduate. But in her short life, she showed more courage, more loyalty, and more honor than you have shown in 45 years. She died trying to save me. You lived trying to kill me. So don't you dare talk to me about legacy. Sarah is my legacy. You are just my biggest mistake." Preston opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The truth hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. He slumped in the officer's grip, all the fight draining out of him as the realization finally hit home. He wasn't just going to prison. He was being disowned. He was being erased from the family narrative, just as he had tried to erase his sister. "Take him away," Rourke ordered. They marched him out of the room. I followed. I didn't want to stay in that room with the smell of betrayal. I wanted to see it through to the end. I wanted to make sure the world saw it too. We walked down the long hospital corridor. The nurses and doctors who had been cleared out earlier were peeking from behind doors, their faces pale with shock. Word travels fast in a hospital. They watched as the chairman of the board, the man who signed their paychecks, was dragged past them in cuffs like a common criminal. Preston kept his head down, trying to hide his face, but it was too late for that. We reached the elevators. Rourke pressed the button for the lobby. "Are you ready for this, Mr. Ford?" Rourke asked me quietly. "I made the call you asked for, but once those doors open, there is no going back." I straightened my back, pulling my shoulders squared, the way the Corps taught me. "I am ready, Detective. Let the world see him for what he is." The elevator doors pinged open at the ground floor. The lobby was not empty. It was packed. I had called the Seattle Times. I had called the local TV stations. I had told them that there was a breaking story at St. Jude's involving the Ford Empire and a murder cover-up. Reporters are like sharks, they smell blood in the water from miles away. And tonight, the water was full of it. As we stepped out, a wall of flashing lights erupted. It was blinding. The cameras clicked furiously, capturing every frame of Preston Ford's downfall. Microphones were thrust forward. Reporters were shouting questions. "Mr. Ford, is it true you are being charged with murder? Mr. Ford, did you really kill your secret sister? Harlan, is it true you set a trap for your own son?" Preston recoiled from the lights like a vampire exposed to the sun. He tried to turn away to shield his face with his shoulder, but the officers held him firm, facing the cameras. This was his walk of shame. This was the moment his carefully crafted image of the philanthropist businessman was shattered forever. I stood back near the elevator doors and watched. I saw the humiliation on his face. I saw the terror. For a man who lived for public approval, this was a fate worse than death. He was being stripped naked in front of the city he wanted to rule. He looked back at me one last time just before they pushed him through the revolving doors into the waiting police cruiser. His eyes met mine through the chaos of the flashbulbs. There was no anger left in them, just a profound emptiness. He knew. He knew that I had beaten him at his own game. The police car doors slammed shut. The sirens wailed and the lights painted the rainy night in red and blue. The car sped away, followed by a caravan of news vans. The lobby slowly quieted down. The reporters realized Preston was gone and turned their lenses toward me. But Rourke stepped in front of me, holding up a hand. "Mr. Ford has no comment at this time," Rourke said. "He needs to rest." Rourke guided me toward a side exit away from the prying eyes. We walked out into the cool night air. The rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking apart, and for the first time in days, I could see a few stars twinkling above the city lights. "You did good," Harlan Rourke said, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "Sarah would be proud." I nodded, but I couldn't speak. The adrenaline was fading, and in its place was a deep, aching grief. I had justice, but I didn't have my children. One was dead, and the other was dead to me. I was the last Ford standing. I looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there, in the vast universe, I hoped Martha was holding Sarah. I hoped they were together. And I hoped that one day when my time finally came, I would be worthy enough to join them. But not yet. I still had work to do. I had a company to dismantle. I had a fortune to give away. And I had a promise to keep to a girl who poured my coffee and saved my life. I walked toward my truck, my boots echoing on the wet pavement. I was alone, but I didn't feel lonely. For the first time in 45 years, the secrets were gone. The lies were buried. And as I started the engine, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. It was over, and a new chapter was about to begin. Make sure you are subscribed and hit that notification bell. In the final part, I face the aftermath. I visit Sarah's grave not as a stranger, but as her father. And I reveal exactly what I did with the $50 million that Preston killed for. The ending will bring tears to your eyes. You do not want to miss the final goodbye. The rain stopped on a Tuesday morning, just as we were lowering the casket into the ground. It is funny how Seattle works. You can go weeks without seeing the sun, and you forget what it looks like, and then right when you think the gray will last forever, the clouds break apart. A shaft of golden light cut through the mist and landed right on the polished granite headstone. It didn't say Maya anymore. We had scrubbed that lie away. The stone was carved deep and clear. Sarah Ford, beloved daughter. October 24th, 1977 to January 14th, 2023. She had lived 45 years in the shadow of a secret, but she would rest for eternity in the light of the truth. I stood there in my black suit, my hands resting on the handle of my cane. I didn't need the cane to walk, but sometimes a man needs something to hold on to when the earth feels unsteady beneath his feet. I wasn't alone. Tara stood a few feet away. She wasn't wearing the expensive designer clothes she used to wear when she was Preston's trophy wife. She wore a simple black coat, and her face was scrubbed clean of makeup. She looked tired, but she also looked free. The divorce papers had been filed the day after the arrest. She had testified against him with a clarity and strength that surprised everyone, including herself. Preston had tried to stare her down in the courtroom, tried to use that old intimidation, but she hadn't flinched. She looked right through him like he was made of glass. I waved her over. She hesitated at first, thinking she didn't belong in the family circle anymore, but I wasn't going to let her stand in the cold. She was the one who opened the door. She was the one who gave me the key to the safe. Without her, Sarah would still be just a Jane Doe in a morgue, and I would be rotting in a memory care facility. Tara stepped up beside me and I took her hand. It was warm. We stood there together, the father who lost a son, and the wife who lost a husband, united by the memory of the girl we both failed to save but managed to honor. When the priest finished his prayers and the few mourners began to drift away toward their cars, I stayed behind. I needed a moment. I needed to have the conversation I had been waiting 45 years to have. I sat down on the stone bench facing the grave. The grass was wet, and the air smelled of damp earth and pine needles. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket and pulled out the leather-bound book. Sarah's diary. I had read almost every page in the weeks leading up to the trial. I had read about her childhood, with her adoptive parents, who were good people. I read about her confusion when she found her birth certificate. I read about the fear she felt when she first approached Preston. But there was one page I hadn't been able to read yet. It was the very last entry written the night before she died. I had saved it for today. I wanted to hear her voice one last time while I was sitting next to her. I opened the book. The pages were crinkled from the damp air of her apartment. Her handwriting was small and neat. January 13th. It has been raining for 3 days straight. I watched Dad at the diner this morning. He looked sad today. He didn't finish his eggs. I wanted to go over there and just sit in the booth across from him. I wanted to tell him that he doesn't have to be lonely. I wanted to tell him that I know he likes his coffee black because he wants to taste the bitterness to wake up. I know he orders wheat toast because he promised Mom he would watch his cholesterol even though he hates it. I know Preston is getting impatient. I can feel it. He called me 3 times today. His voice is getting tighter. He told me to meet him at the motel tomorrow to discuss a settlement. I don't want his money. I never wanted it. I am going to tell him that tomorrow. I am going to tell him that I will sign whatever paper he wants. I will give up the inheritance. I will give up the claim to the company. All I want is to be able to walk into that diner and say, "Good morning, Dad," and have him know who I really am. Even if he never accepts me as a daughter, even if he thinks I am a stranger, that is okay. Just seeing him eat his apple pie every morning is enough for me. It is enough to know he is still here. I just want him to be safe. If leaving town makes him safe, I will go, but I hope I don't have to. I hope tomorrow brings a new beginning. I closed the book. My hand was shaking. A single tear rolled down my cheek into the deep lines of my face. It was hot and salty, and it felt like a release. For weeks I had carried the anger of a soldier. I had carried the rage of a man betrayed. But reading those words, the anger evaporated. It was replaced by a profound sorrow, but also a profound gratitude. She didn't want the empire. She didn't want the skyscrapers or the bank accounts. She just wanted to watch me eat apple pie. She found joy in the simple fact of my existence. In a world where everyone wanted a piece of Harlan Ford, she was the only one who just wanted Harlan. I wiped my face with my handkerchief. I looked at the fresh dirt covering her casket. "You got your wish, kid," I whispered to the wind. "You got your new beginning. It is not the one we wanted, but you are safe now. He can't hurt you anymore. And I promise you, as long as there is breath in my lungs, you will never be a stranger again. The whole world knows your name, Sarah." I stood up and placed a single white rose on the grave. It was time to go. I had work to do. Sarah had left me a mission, and I wasn't going to let her down. 1 year later. The seasons in Seattle had cycled through again, and we were back to the gray drizzle, but everything else in my life had changed color. The trial of the century, as the papers called it, was over. Preston Ford was currently serving 2 consecutive life sentences at the Walla Walla State Penitentiary. I didn't visit him. I didn't write to him. He had become a ghost to me, a memory of a mistake I had corrected. The last I heard, he was working in the prison laundry folding sheets. It was a fitting end for a man who tried to wash away his own blood. Tara had moved to Oregon. I bought her a small house near the coast and helped her set up a bakery. It was what she had always wanted to do before Preston told her it was beneath her station. We talked on the phone every Sunday. She sounded happy. She sounded like herself. As for me, I did exactly what I promised. I sold Ford and Associates. I sold the equipment, the contracts, the buildings, and the name. I liquidated 50 years of hard labor in 3 months. The business world called me crazy. They said I was destroying a legacy. They didn't understand that I was building a new one. With the money, I bought a sprawling estate just outside the city. It used to be a private country club for the elite. Now the sign over the gate read, Sarah's Haven. It wasn't an institution. It was a home. A home for children who had been abandoned, children who had been lost in the system, just like Sarah was. We had 60 kids living there now. They had warm beds, good food, and most importantly, they had families. We focused on keeping siblings together. No one would ever be separated from their brother or sister on my watch. I spent my days there fixing fences, teaching the older kids how to use tools, and reading stories to the little ones. I wasn't the scary CEO anymore. I was just Mr. Harlan, the old guy who always had candy in his pocket. But every morning before I went to the Haven, I kept one ritual sacred. I parked my truck in front of the Rusty Spoon Diner. The neon sign flickered in the morning mist. I walked in, and the bell above the door chimed. The place was busy, full of construction workers and early risers. I walked to the booth in the back corner, the one by the window where I had sat for years. A new waitress came over. Her name was Jenny. She was young and kind, and she knew the routine. "Good morning, Mr. Ford," she said, smiling. "The usual." "The usual, Jenny," I said. "But make it 2 coffees today, and 2 slices of apple pie." She didn't ask questions. She knew the story. Everyone in Seattle knew the story. She nodded and walked away. I sat there looking at the empty seat opposite me. I pulled out the small framed photo I carried in my pocket now. It was a picture of Sarah. Not the autopsy photo and not a surveillance photo. It was a picture Tara had found in Sarah's wallet. It was a selfie she had taken in this very diner months ago. In the background over her shoulder, you could see me sitting in this booth drinking my coffee, unaware that my daughter was capturing the moment. She was smiling in the picture, a secret smile of love and belonging. Jenny returned and placed 2 steaming mugs on the table. Then she set down 2 plates of apple pie dusted with cinnamon. I picked up my fork. I took a bite of the warm, sweet pie. I looked at the photo propped up against the sugar dispenser. I looked at the second cup of coffee steaming across from me. I wasn't crazy. I knew she wasn't physically there. I knew she couldn't drink the coffee. But in that quiet corner of the diner, surrounded by the smell of bacon and rain, I felt a presence. I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the heater. I lifted my mug in a small toast to the empty chair. "Good morning, Sarah," I said softly. "The pie is good today. You would have liked it." I took a sip of the black bitter coffee. I looked out the window at the city I had helped build, and then at the photo of the daughter who had rebuilt me. "I am listening, Dad," I heard a voice whisper in the back of my mind. It was as clear as a bell. I smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached my eyes. I wasn't the lonely old man anymore. I was a father, and my daughter was finally home. Thank you for listening to my story. It was a long journey from the dark cold of the morgue to the warmth of this diner. But I made it. And I hope that if you take anything away from my life, it is this. Blood doesn't make a family. Love does. Loyalty does. And it is never too late to do the right thing. Even if you have to burn your whole life down to build something better from the ashes, it is worth it. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to make a hard choice to protect the ones you love? I read every single comment, and I appreciate every one of you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of truth, justice, and redemption. Until next time, take care of each other. And remember to check on the people who serve you coffee. You never know who they might be.